Hi, thanks so much for joining in. We're talking about Your Money Matters on NDTV Profit, and my name is Mathew. Like the name suggests, this show gets you answers to all of your personal finance-related questions. And today, I'd like to focus on two very important, very useful tools that individuals use to accumulate money for their retirement. One, for employees, is the Employee Provident Fund. And the second, which is also an option for employees, but also for people that are working for themselves, is a national pension scheme for people who work on contract, for example. We'll talk about the kind of wealth creation that you can have over the course of your careers, but we'll also, more importantly, talk about how you should invest the proceeds of these two investments, as well as what you can do with the gratuity money that you will receive if you decide to work for one company for protracted periods of time. Joining me today is in studio Sharad Tandon, who is the founder of Invest at Ease, as well as Santosh Joseph, who is the founder of Germinate Investor Services. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking the time. Sharad, I'll start with you since you're sitting in front of me. The EPF, for the longest time, has been one of the foremost products for employees to invest, and you can't beat that kind of return. But to help people understand the kind of wealth generation that can take place, how would you draw that out?
So Alex, pleasure to be here and talking on this. EPF file might not be the right product to compare returns to return, but it creates wealth. So just to give you an example, in EPF, there is actually around 24% contribution which goes into it, 12% from the employee side and 12% from the employer side.
Right.
And this is percentage of basic plus DA which the salary draws. Now, the employee's contribution, the 12% goes into EPF totally, while from the employer side, the 8.67% goes into something which is known as the employee pension scheme, and rest 3.67% goes into EPF.
Right.
Now look at a simple calculation. So even if you are at 25 years of age, starting your job, probably a basic salary of 5,000, 6,000 bucks, that low, which is possible every time today. So you are looking at 12% of your contribution and 3.67% of employer, so 15% going into it. So around 750, 800 rupees to go into it as a contribution. The returns of the products are controlled by the government, and every year end they declare.
Yeah.
But the best part is it's a classic example of compounding. As people in investment talk, there is nothing which beats compounding. So look at it. Your safe bet to assume over a long period of time, 5 to 10% increment of a salary every year will happen. Right. Some years it will be 2, some year 12, but average will come around 8-10% odd. So if you had only 1,000 bucks starting point of your basic going into it, as a contribution, put yours and employers together and 10% increment, in 35 years of your job, that would grow to more than 1 crore. At assuming at 8.25% return, which was last year's declared return. Now, I'm not even talking about 15 years back where EPF returns were slightly higher, but that sort of compounding of wealth is, which it creates. So for me, the simple advice is, people who are starting their career should not commit only one mistake when they change job to withdraw.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because let the money compound.
Keep it going. The whole analogy of a snowball in sticky snow. Sharad, Santosh, this is an important point because when it comes to the new tax regime, which a lot of people are now using, they're finding that deductible, at least their contribution to the Employee Provident Fund, is no longer available as a deductible from the taxable income. And so some of them are tempted to say, okay, limit my contribution to the bare minimum available and the rest give it to me as a paycheck. So what would you say about that and about the kind of money that can be generated over long periods in the EPF?
So what he said is absolutely spot on, and there are just 2 points I'd like to add to this. I think there's nothing that beats compounding, we know, and I think this example that he gave was phenomenal. But I think if ever you want to get the best out of the power of compounding, he gave it in his example, that is that 35 years, an average 25-year-old will get to let his EPF contribute. We are for long taken time for granted. The secret why this works, even though the contribution amount is small and even though the return is lower than what normally people expect, it's in time that these things swell up to become a huge kitty. Now, even before this taxation came, people were sometimes trying to ensure and calculate how to keep that EPF contribution from their side the lowest because they were always hungry for a greater return. Now, the taxation has made it even more evident for people to leave the least possible because over the last decade or maybe a decade and a half, we've realized the power of compounding with a slightly extra 1 or 2% return can have meaningful impact on your portfolio. But I think the benefit that EPF gives all of us, salaried class, and maybe even the guys who do PPF, is that the luxury of hard coding some bit of your investment where even you can't touch it too often. There's a certain bit of ring fence around it that money is considered and left to stay for long term. The secret in all this is the long term nature of this investment. So there are people who now calculate the post-tax and effective return by reducing the amount of money they contribute. But I still think for many salaried class people, this is their de facto long-term saving tool.
Yeah, a very important point. By the way, I asked Sharad about how you can keep a tab on your investments in the EPF, and he's very helpfully shared some key points. One, you can visit the EPF portal. You can click on e-passbook and you can see that on the home page. You can also enter your UAN number and password and capture and say, click on the sign in button, check on the passbook and select member ID to see your PF balance. If you sign up for the notification, you can also get that at the end of every quarter, if I'm not mistaken, or at a certain
Monthly
period, on a
Quarterly.
monthly basis. Yeah, quarterly or monthly basis, you can get some updates there. But see, the thing is that if you don't invest or if you are out of a job, there is a certain availability of recovering that money. And that's exactly what Sharad was pointing out, which is that you should, if possible, not withdraw that PF when you change jobs or if you have a break. But it's important to point out that if there's a protracted period of absence from work and there are no contributions to the EPF, it's not going to generate income. Sharad, you want to explain that? 36 months?
Okay, so the clause reads like if you are not contributing to an account for more than 36 months at a go, it's deemed to be inoperative and the compounding interest doesn't come into play. But most of us want to find an alternate job if we are in a job, or if you want to decide separately, then the NPS is an alternative. But try to hold on to that 3 years, at least that will compound because it's on the accumulated wealth and it's compounding growth. And the other option for us is at one point of time, which a lot of people are doing, is take a sort of part-time gig which contributes some money so account is active.
Sure, but you need to be an employee. Yeah. Okay, so that's an important point. Now, before we get into gratuity, I do want to discuss the NPS, which I think a lot of people have gravitated towards, Santosh, because it's been pushed in primarily because of that 80CCD, which allows for that 50,000 rupee deduction. Even in the new tax regime right now, you can have your deduction to the taxable income if you're telling your employer to contribute on your behalf to the NPS. So if you are an employee, and here I'm specifically talking about employees, Santosh, does it make sense to also contribute to the NPS?
The answer is yes. And now, if you look at it for the people who really save on taxes, the segment is really small that the people will have a meaningful impact on their 50,000 rupees extra saving on taxes alone. I think this should be seen a little more holistically, that NPS offers you really long-term savings, which is essentially something that we all want to at some level commit to. So therefore, tax saving apart, I think for wherever people can, some bit of their money to be set aside for really long term should be considered, because you can always do things aggressively yourself. But this bit, it's also, like you mentioned earlier, a government scheme. Why would you want to miss the opportunity? So tax benefit, long-term savings, letting it happen from your salary through your employer. These are all a great, ways to save money at a grassroots level.
Fair point. Let's get into the nitty-gritties just a tad bit though. Sharad, the question to you is how much should you contribute? if you have the ability, obviously you have the ability to decide if you're already contributing to the EPF, and of course you can go the route of voluntary provident fund and maximize your contribution to the extent of the whole of the basic. Of course there are restrictions in terms of taxability. 5 lakh rupees
5 lakh.
or thereabouts is actually not thereabouts, 5 lakh rupees exactly is where it is set. But how much do you contribute to the NPS, particularly because only 60% of the proceeds when you do withdraw it are tax-free?
Okay, so for me, the guiding principle which I suggest to a lot of people is, if you are saving around $100 in equity SIPs, at least 25 put into NPS. Reason being very simple, in the change scenarios, the expense ratio is the least of the product you could find in the market. It gives you an extension instead of 60 years to 75 years. So it enhances your compounding. It also gives you an option to manage your allocation actively, which was not the case some time back. So it was driven by your age, your equity allocation used to be get added, but you can manage actively, take 100% equity exposure, compound. If you look at only pure equity NPS offering schemes, their returns vary from 12% to 20% in last 5 years annualized. Now, which is as good as any other MF.
And tax-free.
Tax-free.
And low expense ratio.
Exempt in category, that's the advantage. The only drawback is you will have to buy 40% annuity of the fund value whenever you decide to withdraw.
That's one of the drawbacks. I'll point out another one, but you finish.
Okay. The advantage of that is now in the change regime, the government has allowed you to withdraw 15% as a SWP.
Okay.
So now when you do a reverse of SIP, SWP post your retirement, you can start withdrawing. Your taxation is still limits. And second is NPS tier 1 accounts. You can't withdraw till you retirable age, or you can partially withdraw subject to certain conditions like your hospitalization, house loan, child.
And that's limited.
That's limited. 25% is limited.
Yeah. That was the second drawback, which I thought is very important, because as much as this is a great product, it reinforces the fact that you have to work till you're 60, and the inflexibility of that point is what I think will push a lot of people away.
No, so I beg to differ on that. It doesn't force you to work. The way to look at it, even if I say quit job, say in my case, I left my job last year, 51 odd, I left. I continue contributing to NPS, which is only $1,000 is minimum requirement,
Sure.
continue doing it. And that's why that 25% allocation from the overall SIP was only a bucket for your retirement kitty. So in that sense, you can still continue the same product with the same flexibility with a reduced sort of liquidity. That's the only drawback.
But it's a nest egg that you're building for when you're post-retirement. It's an interesting perspective that you have. Even if you're not earning to the extent that you were earning, if you decide that you've saved enough, when you're 50 years old, you want to kick back and have an early retirement. I'm sure that's not what you did.
No, I did that only.
Okay, so okay, I've gotten your reason. But Santosh, the question is then, how do you choose what you want to invest? Because there are several options in the NPS category as well, and several service providers as well. And as Sharad has pointed out, the returns can go anywhere between 12% to 20% over the last 5 years annualized. And the reason for that is because you can choose from a wide variety of combinations.
So for beginners, I'm one who quit work 9 years ago. I still got my NPS active. So I do this annual contribution sometimes twice a year, sometimes once a year, because I want to keep my account active. And now for me, this is really long-term savings where I want to block me from accessing my own savings, because I want to really keep it long-term. Now, there will be certain disadvantages, I agree, like you just mentioned right now. But we have to remember, that's when you learn to compartmentalize your money and your savings and your basket of money for different age and time profiles. For me, this is really a 60 or post 60, where I also hope that when it comes to 60, I do not have to depend on the NPS, but I still have something at the back of my mind to take care while I'm at 60 or post 60. That's number one. Number two is that, yes, there are many people that offer, but the beauty is this, all of them are very well regulated and even very well priced. He again said this so well. This is possibly the cheapest product that you can get in terms of the quality of the product that is available in the market. Finally, at my own plan, I've tried to get the maximum equity exposure possible while also getting a little bit exposure to corporate bonds and GSEC. There are people that I know who only want GSEC. There are people that I know who are very happy with corporate bonds and GSEC. So the flexibility that it offers is you can be in all the three, equity, corporate bond, and GSEC, or a combination of the three. It's not that you'll be restrictive in your asset allocation. You have the luxury of choosing the asset allocation that your time horizon demands.
Yeah, I have a follow-up on this to Sharad. Sharad, when I'm comparing, and not necessarily like-to-like comparison, but if I look at fixed income mutual funds, and I look at the NPS and those that are oriented more towards fixed income than equity, and I know that the suggestion invariably is go towards the equity allocation, the higher equity allocation is the aggressive option. Post-tax, if I were to talk about it, in fixed income mutual funds, the drawback is that your returns are taxed at slab rate. So if you are to build in that allocation towards fixed income in your overall investment portfolio, which is a good thing to do, then should you opt for the NPS and use it for that purpose?
Okay, so a bookish answer is yes. A very practical answer is, if you have to look at a debt, then look at a balanced advantage fund as a category. I'm digressing to the extent of the products, but see, in the NPS, there are three buckets which you can run. So from 25% equity to 75% equity, that's as per age goes. So which is as good as the moment you cross 50, you're saying you're 35 or 40% only in equity, which a balanced fund will do. And the tax advantage comes there without any negatives which we have discussed in terms of lock-in or withdrawal amount and all. So typically for me, advising to anyone or suggesting to anyone, equity is the way to go in NPS. For other buckets, look at the other open-ended options which are potentially possible in today's scenario.
Okay. Is there a dramatic difference, Santosh, when you're choosing, and here I want to now move towards when you are at that 60-year threshold. First of all, in your opinion, should you extend the maturity of the NPS if you can do that and push that down the road, because you're taking advantage, one, of compounding, and two, of the fact that 60% is withdrawable without taxation?
Alex, the most ideal answer is to delay the NPS as much as possible, but we also have to appreciate and acknowledge the fact that not all of us would be in that situation. I mean, it's a sweet spot to be in, that you come at 60 and then you realize, hey, really NPS doesn't matter for me because I'm otherwise sorted financially and my goals are taken care of. Again, we have to answer this question here. What happens at 60? The primary thing that happens is there is a drop or there is a stoppage of active income where you go to work and you earn money actively. But there could be passive income that you would have built, or there's building in, or there could be so many other avenues for it. I'm not getting into that. So the straightforward answer is, the longer you delay, the better it is because of growth and compounding. But if you do have to start, then you start it because you start ensuring that your financial goals are being met.
Okay, good answer. Now, you have to choose from various service providers when it comes to your annuity product, right? Is there a I mean, of course there is a difference. These are different service providers, but objectively, Sharad, how do you choose from these various options?
So that's a tricky one. And that's probably one of the drawbacks of choosing an annuity provider. So very easy to do it. You go to CRA annuity quotes, you'll find all the providers, what is there. But the problem which I have seen in the life is, the moment I decide to retire, more often than not, all of us want to go to a place which is either our hometown or to a different location than our work location. Now, we need to be cautious at that point of time. Out of the 14, 15 service providers which are there for annuity fund management, whose office is closest?
Right.
Because for any service issues, it will be tough for you to travel back to a bigger town and get it service. And typically all of us, including me, or probably Santosh, you, all of us have been committing the same crime of being lazy, of not updating our KYC records in, say, EPF, Gratuity, NPS, which can be as simple as updating your changed phone number, change address. Now, the moment this happens and you get into service issues, you want a provider to be closer to you.
Yes.
So probably letting go of 0.25% annuity return makes sense for that service, and And then the product choosing is a problem. Each of them provide single annuity, a joint life, and return of premium annuity. Now in joint life also, our understanding till now has been, it's between husband and wife.
Yes.
There are providers now who offer between son and father, grandson and grandfather. So all those tricky questions you have to select and choose, and depends on situation to situation. So more often than not, it's better to have a person to handhold. But again, the challenge is most of the point of service or point of sales staff itself is not so geared to give you all those details at a go for all 14 providers.
Okay. Speaking of this, I have a question on NPS. Obviously, you can only withdraw it after the age of 60. But what happens, God forbid, if you don't make it? You have to give your nomination details, of course. But how does that payout happen?
So in case of any eventuality, the nominee gets the whole payment out. And
100%?
He gets it, then he is supposed to buy 40% annuity.
Sure.
Also.
Okay.
So now it's non-taxable at that point of time also.
Yeah.
But for all those things to fall in place, the critical is your updation of your own PI.
Yes. Yeah, that's an important point. I do want to get into gratuity as well very quickly before we talk about deployment. And Sharad, you've got an interesting data point that you've shared with me just to talk about the kind of benefit that you can have. By the way, the rule is, I thought it was less than 5 years. It's 4 months and a few, 4 years and a few months, right?
So for all the practical parlance, it's 5 years.
5 years, okay.
Because for Gratuity Act, productive month is counted as 26 days. So the new changes says 4 years plus 240 days.
Okay, okay.
So you can complicate it. 240 days of productive work will be calculations, say 9 months or 10 months or to be safer. But easy to remember, thumb rule, it's like old time's sake, and probably we can use it in our calculations also. Rule of 72.
Sure.
So anything which you want to compound, say post office used to compound in 64 months, 70 months, it was simple. 72 divided by interest, that many days. So same, it's easy to remember 5 years. And that's where it is.
So I know somebody, wink wink, who missed out on gratuity by a few days. So I know the pain that you can feel. But assume that you've got all of this amount that you're receiving at the age of 60. The question then arises, how do you deploy that? And Santosh, I'll come to you first on this. Assume that you have an EPF, you have a 60% of NPS, you have a gratuity. This is a very substantial pool of money that you have available to you. How do you allocate it at the age of 60 or beyond?
I think first of all, for those people who are hearing this conversation, we need to, acknowledge them by saying that maybe for the salaried class, this will be one of the largest pockets of money they're receiving during their working careers. You have to be extremely critical and careful about how you manage it. Like they say, success is relative, and when you have money, you'll have even more relatives. So be careful about how you handle this corpus. The first things first is that you have to, gather all of these together, put a good plan, figure out your financial goals and go about it. My point is that while the money coming in is good, what is going to be even more critical and important is how you take care of that money, because this will be a large kitty to take care of you and maybe the family that is dependent on you for a long time to come.
Okay, let's get into some details here. Assume that I'm the person that is asking this question. Imagine that I have more white hair and I'm asking you, Sharad, how do I deploy this large sum of money that I've received? I've worked all my life. How do I deploy it?
So anyhow, you don't have more gray hairs than I have. So the way to look at it is very simple. First question first, and we have to prod each of the investors to the second level of question. Do they have a sort of pensionable job? Some of us can still retire from central government, state government, have a pensions. Does it cover your expenses today?
Right.
Do we have a rental income or a investments income coming in form of dividend, interest, everything else? Now we add those amounts and figure out if my expense will be met.
Yeah.
Then we start allocating into buckets. The thumb rule for 60 plus is very simple. Have 12 to 18 months of your money lying into a short-term fund.
Which is an arbitrage fund or a liquid fund or something like that?
You can do it anywhere, because now with 12 lakhs income, non-taxable will depend on person to person.
Sure.
So if you have 2 files in the house, 24 lakhs become non-taxable.
Yeah.
If you don't have pension, probably put into a short-term fund, it doesn't make a difference to you. Otherwise, arbitrage will make sense. Liquid, if you're opting, then monthly dividend is one of the way to do, because you can have certain portion of the dividend as a tax-free income.
Sure.
Second, 12 to 24 months again. So I'm putting into that 12
Buckets,
to 18
right.
buckets only. Get into hybrid funds. Any bucket after that goes into a sort of multi-asset, multi-cap fund, and last 5-10% of your portfolio is still continue having into a
Equity.
sectoral equity mid-cap portfolio, because you have to beat inflation. The biggest problem at the age of 60, which all of us are doing. So when I started my career in 96, the assumed age of life expectancy in India was 55. Today it's gone up to 72, 73. Now Bangladesh used to be 80.
Right.
Now, if that happens in India, you are running a fear of outrunning your retirement kitty if you are becoming too defensive.
Yes.
So you need to compound slightly more than the inflation. And also, I'm sure at that age, all of the grandparents, grandfathers, grandmothers would want to enjoy their life. So keep a kitty separately for that, whatever it can be.
Yeah. So I think you've answered quite a few questions, and Santosh, you as well have answered quite a few questions. And what we'll do is we'll do a masterclass perhaps next week just to talk about how to construct this kind of a portfolio. I think the objective of this conversation has been how to identify what to do with your EPF and your NPS. Now, I do want to very quickly address one more aspect, which is specifically with the EPF. Sharad, I know that the EPFO has been working towards fixing a few of these problems with regard to the withdrawal and redemption, but there are still a few niggling issues. From the perspective of the investor, how do you avoid these issues?
So I'll take my own case. So when I left my job in August last year, typical IT company, HR is all automated. So now the challenge is half the time you don't have anyone to talk to. So the only option is first get into all the KYC norms completed, nomination completed, and the key thing is not to forget your family pension. Because the portion which goes into family pension creates that additional pension for you. So it's a generic tick mark like your mutual fund investment or life insurance. But if you are cautious of that, things will fall in place.
Great. Okay. So on that note, if you've got any specific questions for us with regard to the withdrawal of your EPF, make sure to write to us in the comment section. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Your Money Matters. Santosh, Sharad, thanks so much for joining us today, and pleasure having you on the show. All right. Do stay tuned. Lots more coming up on NDTV Profit.